Hello and welcome to the Digital Insight, the technology and supply chain podcast that delivers valuable C-level perspective into the core issues surrounding business transformation and digital disruption. Each episode will bring you the most inspiring executive insights from those leading transformation strategies within the world's biggest and best-known companies. The Digital Insight. Disrupt, transform, evolve.
Welcome to the Digital Insight, the official podcast series for CPO Strategy and Interface magazines. In this episode, I'm joined by CJ Das, CIO of SimpleTire, as we break down and explore the very concept of digital transformation. With over 20 years' experience, from being a software manager to becoming a chief digital officer, and in his current role as CIO, CJ looks to answer a simple question. What is digital transformation? CJ, welcome to the Digital Insight.
Thank you for having me, Dale.
No, it's our pleasure. So as a means of kicking off our conversation today, and just so we sort of get a bit of a feel as to who you are and what kind of experience you have, can you sort of just give me a bit of an overview as to your kind of career journey, and particularly, obviously, from a technology and digital perspective, where you find yourself today?
So I started my career as a developer, and that was about 20 some years back. Since then, I have held various positions. But as far as digital transformation is concerned, I think I got primarily interested in this particular transformation when I became the chief digital officer in Chicago in a company called Rand McNally, and that was 2006. Digital transformation was not called digital transformation those days. It was just a transformation using digital tools and tackles. So we'll go into detail of that. But then after I have had a chief data officer position, then I became a CIO. Even as a CIO in my current company, we do not have a chief digital officer. And therefore, all the digital transformation, all the responsibilities fell on me as a CIO. So this topic is near and dear to my heart. And we'll discuss more very soon, I'm sure. But I'm working as a CIO today. Beside all other IT responsibilities, transforming the company digitally is also my responsibility.
You've already touched upon a few things there that you're absolutely right. We'll expand on a little further, further into our discussion. But looking again, then of course, so you said you worked for around 20 years. Starting from that developer role, and then obviously moving your way through the kind of technology space into more senior positions. This is a very broad question, but you've already touched on a few of these things, but how has the kind of technology and the digital conversation changed? So, if you could go back to yourself, even when you were a developer, as you are now, what would you be saying? How has the conversation around technology changed today as to what it was when you started out?
When you started out, we used to call it automation more than anything else, simplification. There's a business process. We need to expedite the business process. Or let's talk about operations, for example. There are various processes and operations. We need to automate those. And that was nothing but digitization, if not transformation per se. The discussion changed later on, I will say primarily because the expectations from users changed. Users have a different expectation, and we had to keep up with the pace. So when we call digitization, at least when I was the chief digital officer, we changed the game plan slightly. What that means is that we started with the customer. Let's go to customer and see what they want. Changing something just because there are digital tools available there today, it doesn't make sense necessarily. So we would start with the customer and then trace back and see what do we need to do as a business to provide value, to provide relevance. And in doing so, what are the modern tools we can use? Whether it is an AI platform to do the job better, whether it is any other data modeling that we can do, and so on. It depends on the business, it depends on the situation, but very often we could not do digital transformation. It was not possible to transform the business, but we could do digitization and that is basically small steps towards the transformation, a gradual iteration. So the discussion changed over the years um, because of the expectations from our customers change, and because we had some tools available to change the business and take some quote unquote giant leaps instead of making small tweaks as we were doing earlier when I was a developer.
Yeah, and you've already sort of touched upon it there, but you've said it yourself that once upon a time it wasn't called digital transformation. It's just kind of, to put it bluntly, the conversation changed, the topic changed, but it still focuses on the sort of same things that it always has done. It's just obviously, the tools around it, the customer expectations have changed. And this is something that I like to sort of ask a lot of people that I talk to in this space is, well, what does it mean? What does digital transformation mean? Because, open a book now or go online and almost everybody's engaging in a digital transformation and, embarking on these journeys. But obviously each journey is different to each company because it's obviously based on a whole host of goals and key factors. But how do you go about defining what digital transformation means, from the very start?
Yes, so every company has to define the journey for themselves, and very different for each company, as you mentioned. And many of the companies, although they call that they're doing digital transformation, actually they're not. They're doing some kind of digitization. Let's take, for example, yesterday I was at the car rental place, and you have the regular standing in the line in order to take a rental car, or you could go to the kiosk. And in the kiosk, you could go and punch in your number, and you get a rental car, you get the so on and so forth. I'm sure you have used that. All of us have used that. Now, that kiosk is not a transformation. That is just another interface that has been given to help the customer. So I wouldn't say that business has changed. They're still in the car rental business. It's just another way to serve the customer better. I would call a digitization. So you see, they have said, "Hey, we are in car rental business. We'll continue to be car rental business. Probably we cannot bring about a large change. Unlike a startup company, if I'm a startup company, I'll say, you know what, I'll transform the business altogether." And it could be, let's take a banking industry, for example. They're lagging behind slightly. And they give excuse every day. Oh, we have this rule, that rule we cannot do. And then I see Venmo and other apps and various apps or smaller companies, they're trying to disrupt, and they're doing digital transformation in those cases. They're finding new ways altogether, which are unheard of, to serve their customers, how to transfer money and other banking activities. So they're doing digital transformation, whereas this rental car had just provided another digital way of doing business. So they have defined this rental car enterprise, they have defined their journey in a different way. Whereas Venmo and other companies have defined it in another way. Let's take another example. Let's say Aeroflot, which is the Russian airlines. I was told that they were one of the world's worst airlines, apparently, arguably, at one point in time, but not anymore. So they decided that, well, our business cannot transform as such. Basically, what we do is to sell seats in a plane, right? That's what we do. And that's what we'll continue to do. But let's go back to the customer sense. What do they want? Why are we the worst or among the worst? And they traced back, and they found they have problem with the engines, reliability, maintainability, and so on and so forth. So they use some digital tools. In this case, they use IoT. IoT is nothing but, in this case, adding some sensors to their turbines and machineries so that they can maintain them better. They can predict their maintenance and so on and so forth, so that the downtime is minimal. They have some metrics, reports showing what should be maintained, how many hours this engine is run, and so on and so forth. So today, I believe they're in the top 10. And again, don't quote me on that, but they're pretty good. They're not as bad they used to be. So they took a route where they said we'll use IoT sensors where we'll get data from each engine, and accordingly we'll plan our maintenance of the engines and a few more things. Okay, I'm simplifying here, but few more things they did. They use IoT in that case. So you see the point. A Venmo or some smaller startup companies can do a digital transformation because they have a brand new idea to disrupt the industry. They transform the business altogether, the landscape changes. Whereas some other companies might say, we will do digitization, but nonetheless, we'll use some digital tools and we'll serve our customers better. So from these examples, I think it's becoming clear that each has to define their own journey. Whether you transform or not, you have to serve the customers better. And in doing so, let's use some modern digital tools.
And that's sort of, sticking with digital tools there. And you've already mentioned a few there. That's another thing that I always, in speaking to a number of people in covering these digital transformation journeys, is that you start to hear, I don't want to say the same technologies, but obviously the key trends, the key buzzwords, the key topics. So, you talk about AI, you talk about IoT, but obviously as technology has advanced and these digital tools have become more readily available, how hard is it then, or how much more difficult is it for a company to make the right decisions when it comes to adopting technologies, so that they're not just saying, well, my competitor's using AI, let's look at AI, and rather they're saying, we need AI because it will better suit, the way we work with customers, or it'll better suit us as a business?
Right. I think it should be the latter, that let us find out what tool is there. Just because somebody is using IoT, I may be in an industry where I do not need IoT, but let's take my current company, okay? We found that the customers do not really want to talk to us. And that's probably true for many, many companies. They try to avoid talking to, you and me, the regular people. We don't like to pick up the phone and call. If there's a chat available on the website, we'd rather use the chat. And that's the norm. Now, the chat is very common, but chat has some limitations. It can only do so much. It doesn't have so much of intelligence. So we decided, how can we make the chat so intelligent that customers will come to us who do not want to talk to us, but feels very comfortable talking or chatting, can have a more human-like interaction. Not only that, the chat will help them in their buying decisions, almost like a human being. So we used to see the people who would come to our website, sometimes even they would put the goods or merchandise in the cart and then abandon it. So what is going on here? At the last moment, they hesitate. So can you use the chat to help the customer? Customer is almost there. Last moment, can we just push them a little bit, help them? They probably need answers to some very small questions. In this case, that was the business case. See, there's a need. We have identified a need here if you can make the chat very intelligent. So we looked at different platforms. We did our research. In this case, we decided to use Lex, which is basically the platform that Alexa uses. So you see, you said, is there tools readily available? Answer is yes, Lex is there. And not only you can use Lex, also it is serverless. We use the serverless version called the Lambda. Meaning you don't have to install anything. You just use the server as is, which is hosted by Amazon. So we use Lex, and I'm not going to detail, but basically we added some intelligence using Lex and then integrated that chat, which we had already, a very simple chat, a chat bot. We integrated that in the back end with ERP system, with CRM, with product management system. So now the chat knew the customer, knew what kind of buying history the customer had from the ERP system, all the POs and so on. Chat knew all the product details. And we had built in some data modeling to identify the customer at a granular level, meaning what is the tipping point of the customer, right? If the customer is hesitating, has spent 50 seconds waiting, watching on the website, looking at the cart, maybe this particular customer needs a discount of $10. Let's just say we have identified that, okay, from the past behavior. So you see that now the chat will come and say, oh, if you buy da da da, we'll give you $10 discount. So the chat will walk you through each step of the buying process. So in this case, we use Lex, and there are many other, and we use Tulio as well, okay, for communication. Tulio does a better job. But nonetheless, in this case, we identified a tool readily available. We went for it. And today, the chatbot is no more a chatbot as such. It is almost like a human being, almost like a sales channel.
And what's interesting then is, you talk about identifying a specific tool, and obviously the marketplace, the world is full of new tools and these digital tools. It's almost as if something new and something disruptive is coming, every single day. How then do you, both on a personal level but also professionally as a business, continue to stay in tune with what's going on, so that you know what's happening out there and you don't fall behind, so that you don't come to a digital tool and actually, it's too late, so to speak?
That's a very difficult question. And since there are so many tools mushrooming every day, it is becoming very difficult for me, especially as a CIO, or perhaps a CDO is in the same boat as me, to keep up. So I try to read as much as possible. I try to attend conferences. Gartner, for example, is a good conference to attend, and so on. There are many, but it's not easy. And there are a lot of shiny objects out there. And for example, blockchain. And I will not be able to talk about blockchain because I really do not know blockchain, but I have the basic idea. And once I get the basic idea, at least I know I really do not need to use blockchain as far as my current industry is concerned. Not at this point in time. But I'm not going to jump headlong on blockchain because some financial institution is using it or something like that. So that kind of judicious or business acumen one needs to have at C-level, I assume. But beyond that, I think it is just keeping up with the trends, learning. But unless there is a specific use case, I don't think one needs to really start using a tool just because it's a new tool and somebody might be using it.
No, absolutely. And you sort of raised an interesting point there, and this sort of ties back to what you said earlier about how kind of the way the role of the CIO has evolved and it's changed now. The responsibilities are different. The people that you work with and the way you communicate together has changed. Is there still, though, a case where you find yourself having to communicate to the wider business and wider business units in a language that makes sense to them? For example, your entire career has been surrounded by technology. You've always been involved in it in some way, so you have a base level knowledge that's different than, to say, somebody else in the business in a different unit. So is there often a case where you're finding yourself having to communicate the value of technology, the value of digital transformation to people who perhaps don't have that innate sort of understanding?
Yes, it happens every day. And truly speaking, a CIO is more of a business person than a technology. That person is technology person at his or her core, but otherwise, to be successful, CIO has to be a business person. And the ability to explain things without using any technical terms is the most important in communication. And CIO is viewed as the hub, so to say, of innovation. Some bigger companies may have a chief innovation officer. Some bigger companies will have a chief digital officer, chief data officer, and so on and so forth. Whereas smaller companies do not. Many companies do not. Even bigger, medium-sized companies do not. So CIO becomes the person not only who has to innovate, not only who has to do digitization, not only who has to understand data science, but also, as you said, explain these things, all the things that are happening today, explain to the business, even to the board, and help keep the organization ahead of the curve. So CIO's responsibility has changed quite a bit. I have been in C-level for I don't know, 13 years or so now, 14 years. Things have changed a lot. Some of CIOs that I used to report to, their jobs were different. They were seen as a technology person who would be the guardian of the systems. Today, with cloud and all, somebody else is the guardian, really speaking. We are no more the guardian, or you cannot be the guardian. You cannot be the gatekeeper. That's not the role anymore. They just data center, I'm the gatekeeper. That will not do. Your role has changed all the time. You have to explain. And if you're truly a good technologist, then you do not have to use any technical language at all in order to explain. And more you explain in non-technical words, others will understand better. They will jump onto the bandwagon that you are trying to drive, and more successful you'll be.
And sort of following on from that, then, for a company that's about to embark on a digital transformation journey, who would be? I guess there's not going to be just one person that's driving this change. That one person who you report to that's going to be in charge of the entire transformation journey. But who are, should I say, the key deliverers, as it were, of a digital transformation?
So if there's a digital transformation officer, at the end of the day, he's, from the business title, he is responsible. But normally, chief digital officer is I belong to a different category, but when I look at digital officers today, they are mainly pseudo marketing kind of people. They're more of marketing people. So they can come up with the ideas, the use cases, and so on. But at the end of the day, the CIO has to execute. So CIO is always there, whether in the forefront or in the background. So CIO and chief digital officer, they have to work in tandem. If there's no chief digital officer, then he's a CIO working with the chief marketing officer. Chief marketing officer, as you know, are very technology savvy people. So especially in e-commerce, let's say, they own the e-commerce sites from business perspective. So this CIO, in conjunction with chief marketing officer, has to do all the transformation. The CEO, of course, is the boss of the company, but normally they are finance folks, and they are into numbers, they're into all that stuff. So, he is responsible because he is the captain of the ship, but otherwise he doesn't get involved in day-to-day activities. So either it is the chief digital officer or the CIO or the chief marketing officer. One of the three, or all of the three, has to work together to bring about this transformation.
So then, looking at a transformation and kind of taking it back to the very start, what are those initial steps? Because obviously, a digital transformation, all the pieces are in place. It sounds great. It sounds, we want to embark on this journey. But what are those first steps? How do you actually, begin? How do you take those first steps and actually start a transformation journey?
So I'll tell you the way I have taken the steps and what I have seen. One is that I told you earlier, what is the market scenario? What is the demand out there? What do the customers want? Although we might be profitable, it doesn't mean we are complacent. Then somebody is going to disrupt us and take our market share away. So what is that? So that pulse of the customers has to be felt. What do they want? What is the next thing do they want? So that might tell us what we need to do. How do we need to transform the business? That is one way. But I have a second method, so to say, that I have used, and that is to have a R&D team. I have always have had a small skunk team or an R&D team, and their job is obviously research. But what is the next thing we should be working on? What is the next big thing? Their job is to invent new products, so to say, new offerings to the customers. So this is very important, I think, for any company to have a small skunk team or R&D team. And it is important to tell the R&D team that you don't play by any rules. Because if I impose the same rules that you have today, whether it is SOX, whether it's PCI, whether it is whatever ISO 9000, whatever rules are there, then they'll not be able to freely think and invent new things. So whether I give them a couple of servers outside as a sandbox to play with, and not bound by any rules, just play and come up with new ideas and new offerings, or rather, and I also try to hire some young folks, young blood, so to say, for this R&D team. Why? Because young people I have seen, these days they have very little respect for the bigger institutions. If you have too much of respect, too much of the baggage, if you have past baggage, you cannot then think freely, think new ways. So I need some new blood who, so to say, quote unquote, just do not care, who could potentially even be rogues. Uh, see, when Uber came initially, most people opposed of the taxi company or other industries, and they were viewed as rogues. But that it gained momentum. Today they are part of our life. So maybe initially you'll be called a rogue, no problem. I'd rather have rogues than lose my business. So in a roguelike environment, let the R&D folks, brilliant people, and it could be a mix of young and old, okay? But people, those will think differently. They can come with new offerings. Once you have a new potential product, now, of course, marketing will get involved. What is the return for this and so on and so forth. So these two ways I have done. One is, let's go back to the customer, whether in the focus group or however marketing people will do that for me. Tell me what is going on out there. What do the customers really want? What will the customer want tomorrow in many ways? And the R&D group, tell me what we could be doing, given the data we have, given whatever products we have today, what is the next big thing we could be doing? And once I've identified some revenue generating, potentially some product, now that's a business case. Now let's look at the tools. What is the best tool we could be doing, and then transform the business digitally?
No, absolutely. And something you sort of touched upon a little bit there, you talked about bringing in new blood, and almost, inviting people to have challenge the way of working and challenge the entire sort of traditional way of thinking. And that then speaks to the idea of obviously a huge cultural change that sort of happens as part of transformation. So obviously we talk about technology and we talk about like these end goals, but one of the key things as well is actually the people and the business models change around this sort of transformation. And obviously that can cause challenges and difficult moments, because you're working with people that have been very, have operated in a certain way very successfully for a number of years. To ask them to sort of reimagine the way they work can be quite difficult. And I'm curious then, how do you kind of overcome that? How do you work as an organization to sort of re-energize and ensure that these people can come along in that journey, that you can bring them along and you can, change them or rework them in a way to suit this newer way of working?
Yeah, exactly as you said, rework, new ways. These are the things has to explain to them. So people are good. Almost 100% of the time, the employees are good. They have been put in a situation where they might be doing the same thing over and over for years. And some of the new technologies might scare them. But if you explain them, hey, look at this, better for the company. This is how the revenue will come from. And guess what? These manual things you do not have to do. We are going to elevate you. You will be doing better things. Some people might think I lose my job and so on and so forth. As long as you explain, the communication is done. I think, the change of culture has to be top down, first of all. From the top, people has to change. And then if they're shown the right way, explain the right way, let's say you're implementing new ERP system, accounting people will be doing things differently, and so on and so forth. People in the warehouse will be doing differently. But these folks have business knowledge. They have knowledge, business domain, which is most important. Technology will come and go, but people with knowledge in the institutional knowledge, tribal knowledge, that is important. So my aim is to retain people. People will be elevated to the next level, more value-added tasks they'll be doing. As long as you can find that, and as a leader, it's our job to find that, and they see a progress in their career, culture will change. And I'll give you, let's say we want to be agile. Okay, we want to be agile. Okay, just talking will not do. I know one company in Salt Lake City. They said, well, we're going to agile, all right, we'll do bi-weekly release and all that, that is good. But culture, the way people think, wasn't changing. So the top management said, any decision that we have to make at the top level has to be done within 24 hours. That was kind of the unwritten or written rule. So you see, now you're forced to be agile. I don't know if it's a good or bad way, but I thought it was pretty eye-opening that the top C-level people will say, any decision that comes to my table, I will have a decision and a final decision within 24 hours. Now, the top guys are setting the examples. When it comes to tools, people, and if some people do not fit into the mold, then too bad. But those are far and few between, I think. Most people, ones that explain properly how things will work in the new world, what kind of value they'll be adding, at the end of the day, how their work will transform the business and help revenue, if you explain them all that, and that job is safe, but it will change. The change is constant, only the change has to be managed. As long as you manage the change, I think we should be fine.
No, absolutely. And one thing I'm always curious to ask is, we are experiencing a time of great challenge, but also great opportunity, thanks to technology. And obviously transformation is happening everywhere. And companies now, more than ever before, are embracing change. They're embracing innovation, they're embracing technology. But there's always going to still be barriers, and there are going to be reasons not to invest and not to, take this risk, as it were. What do you feel are some of the biggest barriers that remain, in terms of embracing a digital transformation?
The baggage some of the companies carry, I think, are the barriers. For example, the old companies, let's take General Motors, for example, a humongous automotive company. They have, and I have some of my friends working there. They have unions. They have just things that make them slow. They have huge plants which are 50 years old. They just cannot compete with Tesla. So they have to come up with new ways to do things. Spin up a new business altogether, a sister company or something like that. They have to do, but being where they are just entrenched in a situation where things are very difficult for them to move faster. So those are some of the political or pseudo-political reasons, are the barriers. Um, Beside that, I think some of the top people just cannot think, um, or have the ability to come up with the right strategy. See, you have to always assume that, however well we might be doing, there is somebody sitting in a garage somewhere at this point in time trying to disrupt the business. So how do I keep ahead in the game? So continuously reinventing oneself, continuously disrupting oneself, or maybe even cannibalize oneself. And P&G, Procter and Gamble, does that all the time. They try to cannibalize themselves all the time, come up with products that will compete with their own products. This kind of strategy one got to have, but if you do not have that mentality, uh, people in the top are having political games. I know one company where the investors just don't want to invest, because of other financial reasons. They just do not want to do anything. Uh, there is more gain, I guess, in that specific case in bankrupting that company than investing in it. Any case, that is one-off case. But most of the situation, I think, the top leaders are just not ready to change. So the problem, I think, is in the top, not in the bottom or middle layer.
And I guess then my final question for you is one about, so if someone was to come to you and they are in the midst of a digital transformation, they've experienced some failures and some sort of roadblocks along the way, they're now at a critical turning point where the next few years ahead are going to be hugely important in terms of delivering this transformation. If you could give one piece of advice in terms of how, not necessarily a secret to success, because obviously everything's different, but if you could give one piece of advice to somebody, or even to our listeners, or to anyone who's embarking on these journeys, who's in the midst of a transformation, what will be key? Well, not necessarily a guaranteed success, but key to, following the right path and making the right informed decisions.
I think if they have had some success, they need to continue down that path. If, as you said, they have had some success, some failures, and that is the nature of the game. Companies that I have worked, we have had our own ups and downs as well, but you just cannot give up. You have to continue, even if there are failures, you have to continue down that path. Informed decisions will come from the people mainly who are in touch with the customers. In one case, the company was struggling, and I was having a breakfast with a friend, and my advice to him was, you have a large group of people on the phone. They had a large call center. Listen to what the customers say. What is the conversation going on there? Go back to the basics, and listen to the customer. What are they saying? So that was the advice I gave. But at the end of the day, you have to feel what customers are trying to tell you. And they installed a system where they could record the conversations, and then the middle layer managers would listen in. Oh, they want this, So, and then you bucketize those requirements and work towards that. I don't have any silver bullet, so to say, but in this case, business, as I said, I advise them, you have a call center. That is your strength. That is your interface of the company with the customers. Yeah, you have so many other things, but none of them are talking to the customer. This small, or rather large group of people, but totally neglected because their call center, nobody cares about them. They're in the lowest of the lowest category people, $10 hour people working there, but they are the one who are talking to the customers. So go back to that. Okay, so that's the advice I give, and perhaps advice will be different for different industry, but the journey has to be continued, and the top people has to have that ability to some extent see the future. That's why they are being paid so much. The C-level people, they are supposed to take the business to the next level, and that intuition, you call it research, you call it their background, their exposure to things, however way, they have to see the future to some extent. How did the Google folks know there is a huge market of search engines, right? So they saw the future. Somehow they saw the future. That ability has to be there in the C-level people.
So one thing that we haven't spoken about so far is data. And I know that it's a cliche, but data is key to everything in terms of these transformations. Tell me a little bit then about the importance, from your perspective, of how companies utilize data, capture data, and again, take key lessons working forward.
Sure, Dale. I thank you for asking that question. That is one thing I'm very passionate about. In my case, I have a statistical background as well. And so data, I give more importance to data than anything else. See, the amount of data is increasing every day, whichever industry you might be in. And not only we have the data, which might give a glimpse into the behavior of customers, what is the next best thing, the trend, and so on. So we also have data science, a new chapter in data algorithms. So data science, nothing but use of some statistical models to understand the behaviors, or even come up with new offerings to the customers and to solve business problem. So some of the companies that I have seen is nothing but use of the data they already have and come up with the different models, either to solve the business problems, either digitize the processes they have, whether it's in marketing, whether it is in finance or in operations, but also come up with some of the offerings, new products, so to say, to the customer. So as the data is increasing, I think the value of the data needs to be realized by the top people in the company. And if they do not have data scientists, and they're nothing but people with PhDs in statistics and so on, they should hire and do some data modeling. There are a lot of new tools out there. Many of the tools are just visualization. I'm not talking about those tools. I'm talking tools that can do modeling, data modeling, and then they can use that for the digital transformation.
Thank you for listening to the Digital Insight Podcast in association with theinterface.net and cpostrategy.com. The Digital Insight is brought to you by B2E Media Limited. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Please remember to subscribe, rate, and review, and don't forget to check out our podcast archive at www.b2e-media.com/podcast.